How worried are you that trade tensions escalate into a trade war?
I'm worried because I think that there is a risk of having a trade war between the United States and China, between the United States and the rest of the world. And I really think that we should do our best to avoid that trade war, which would lead to less growth, less employment, and more geopolitical difficulties.
But in the more immediate term, it's about also convincing the U.S. not to impose tariffs on steel. For the moment, you're exempt, but for a short time.
We cannot accept France and Europe to be hit by new tariffs coming from the United States. And what we really want is a full and permanent exemptions for the EU of the new American tariffs. We are allies, and we cannot understand that kind of policy which might jeopardize growth and private companies either in France or in other European states. So we are waiting, I want to be very clear on that, we are waiting for a full and permanent exemptions from the American tariffs on Europe.
Do you think that you will get some kind of indication that the U.S. will be willing to grant you that today?
I hope so, and I have been very clear with Steven Mnuchin. We have a very good relationship, and I think that it allows us to have very clear and very frank discussions on that question of trade. I will have also important meetings on Monday in Washington during the state visit of Emmanuel Macron to the United States with Wilbur Ross and with Mr. Lighthizer. And I hope that they will understand that we are allies. The United States and France, the United States and European countries are allies, and we cannot understand that between allies there are such threats coming from new tariffs on steel and aluminium.
Will that be the main message also from President Macron when he comes to Washington next week, or will there be also talk about, digital technology?
So there will be other topics, of course, but that question of trade will be really one of the important questions that will be raised during the state visit of Emmanuel Macron to the United States. And I want to seize the opportunity of those G20 and G7 meetings here in Washington to explain the political position of France and of all European countries. We are allies. We want that full and permanent exemption, and we do not want to run the risk of having decisions coming from one of our closest allies, I mean the United States, jeopardizing growth and the economic situation in France.
How much of the talks at the G20 and the G7 level was on China, on what China will do next and what Europe can do to bring China closer to them?
We have to engage China, and we want China to abide by their international commitments. We want China to help us to build a new multilateral approach as far as trade is concerned. But the right solution is not to engage into any kind of war against China. The right solution is to engage China, to have China on board, trying to improve the multilateral institutions related to trade. When you are looking at the current situation, we all know that there is a full weakening of all multilateral institutions related to trade. We want to build a new multilateral approach and a new multilateral order as far as trade and economy is concerned, and we want China to be on board with us.
Minister, domestically, the French president, yourself, are pushing for a lot of reforms, but there are strikes almost every week. Does that mean that they're at risk, or will you double down, and does you even have more resolve to actually push these reforms through?
We will keep the path of reforms. We will keep the pace of reforms, because with Emmanuel Macron we strongly believe that we need those reforms to improve the competitiveness of French companies, to improve the attractiveness of France, and at the end of the game to create more jobs for French people. So we have already decided last year to introduce a total overhaul of the French tax system. We have been able to modernize the labor market in France, and this year we will adopt a new law on competitiveness for French companies, especially for French SMEs, which will allow us to have more competitiveness within French companies. Because the key issue is, first of all, to improve the level of growth and the creation of jobs in France, but also to restore the credibility of the French political power.
But the French want to be reformed, or are you concerned that because of the strikes...
There is a large majority of French people that want those reforms, because we are in a democracy. And in a democracy, there are people that are against the reforms, so there are strikes. This is something normal, and we have to live with that. But at the end of the game, we will keep the reforms, we will adopt the laws, and we will improve the situation of the French people.
And for the moment, there's no talk of retracting some of them or watering down the reforms.
It is really not the right solution. It's what has been done during the last 3 decades, I would say. We wanted to do something, there were strikes, and the French governments decided to withdraw their reforms. We won't do that. We will stand firm and we will put those reforms to the end for the sake of improving the situation of French people. We are not doing reforms for the sake of doing reforms and being able to say, well, there are a lot of reforms in France. That's not the point. The point is to improve the economic situation of France and the political credibility of our nation.
Minister, one final question. Do you worry about the high level of the euro? And I'm going to let you go because a lot of these people are waiting to go into your photo opportunity for the G20. But are you worried about euro?
No, I'm not worried about the level of the euro because I think that it reflects the growth and the economic recovery in Europe, so that's not a point of concern for us. My point of concern is really linked to the situation on trade.